The emergency alarm pierced the glass walls of the executive boardroom, echoing across Terminal 6. Red lights flashed in the corners, signaling a critical aircraft incident on the runway. Executives stood abruptly, papers sliding off the polished table. Outside, through the massive window overlooking the airport, a private jet sat surrounded by frantic engineers waving their arms. Smoke curled from beneath its left engine. Lorenzo Marchetti, CEO of Marchetti Air, was already halfway to the door when the security panel beeped. Someone was entering. The door slid open. Amahle Dubé stepped inside.
Who?
She was still in her reflective yellow ground operations vest, her braids tied back, her ID badge hanging loosely around her neck. She looked breathless, like she had run the length of the terminal. In her hand she held a black aviation folder, one only high-level engineers handled. The entire board froze. For a heartbeat, no one said a word. Through the glass, the airport moved on, planes taxiing, luggage carts rolling, but inside the boardroom, everything narrowed to the girl in the doorway and the man who couldn't seem to take his eyes off her. If you've ever wondered what happens when someone ordinary walks into a room full of power and refuses to back down, stay with this story. By the end, you'll know exactly why this moment mattered, and if you like stories where one decision changes everything, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Senator Falco, the oldest member, slammed his palm on the table so hard the microphones jumped. Who is she? The question cracked through the room like thunder. Several executives turned toward Lorenzo, others toward security. Amahle froze in the doorway, clutching the folder like a shield. She had no idea why her presence felt like an earthquake. But everything, the tension, the danger, the fear, had started 2 weeks earlier. 2 weeks ago, Amahle was simply trying to stay invisible. On her second week as a ground operations analyst at Rome International Airport, she spent most of her time monitoring engine diagnostics and updating flight logs. She liked numbers. Numbers didn't shout. Numbers didn't threaten. Numbers didn't ignore her accent or underestimate her because she was new. But people did. She tried to avoid trouble, but trouble had a way of finding her. That morning, she noticed a vibration spike on the left engine of a private jet scheduled for takeoff in 2 hours. The spike wasn't dramatic, but it was unusual. It reminded her of an engine incident she'd read about during training, an overheating valve that went unnoticed until the jet lifted off. She zoomed in, checked again, reran the diagnostics. The pattern didn't change. Bellini, she called, turning to her supervisor. Can you look at this, please? He didn't even walk over. He glanced lazily from his chair, more interested in his coffee than her screen. Probably a sensor error, he muttered. We don't want to delay VIP flights over nothing. She hesitated. Sir, the last time I saw a pattern like this in training. That was training, he cut in. This is real life. Clear it and move on. Her jaw clenched. New hires didn't insist. New hires didn't challenge men who'd worked in aviation longer than they'd been alive. New hires certainly didn't make enemies in their second week. So she quietly documented the anomaly and sent a copy to the engineering team. She hovered over the CC line for a second, heartbeat loud in her ears, then added another address, the CEO's technical liaison. Why did you send the report to my liaison instead of your supervisor? He asked, not looking at her yet. Because my supervisor doesn't listen to me. Because when I speak, people hear an accent before they hear a warning. She didn't say any of that. It seemed important, she murmured instead. He turned then, really looking at her. Up close, he didn't just look like a CEO. He looked tired, like someone who hadn't slept properly in days. There a faint line between his brows, and when his gaze locked on her, she felt pinned in place. You were right, he said quietly. It wasn't a sensor error. Her chest tightened, but not from fear, almost from relief, mixed with something warmer she didn't want to name. He believed her. That single fact made her feel dangerously seen. He stepped closer to the screen, eyes flicking between the data and her. Tell me something, Ms. Dubé. Where did you learn to read heat pattern shifts this accurately? My father repaired aircrafts at Katoka International, she said softly. I grew up around engines. I used to sit beside him and watch him read diagnostics before I could even read the words. He nodded, impressed. That nod did something to her, like a lock finally turning after years of knocking. But the next words came out colder. If you're this observant, it means you're seeing things powerful people don't want you to see. She stiffened. I don't understand. You will. He dismissed her with a small gesture, but the warning stayed lodged in her chest like a stubborn bolt. As she walked out, she could feel his gaze on her back, heavy and unreadable. For 2 days, things were quiet. Too quiet. No one spoke to her. No one looked at her. Bellini didn't assign her new tasks. Her reports disappeared from the system. When she logged into the maintenance database, certain files were mysteriously locked. She told herself it was a glitch. Her gut told her it wasn't. Then an anonymous message appeared on her tablet. She tried again, voice higher. Control, this is Dubé at Ops, we have unstable readings on incoming flight. A system alert flashed across her console. Communications error. Channel unavailable. Her heartbeat stuttered. Someone had killed the line. She could have sat there. She could have obeyed Lorenzo and stayed out of sensitive territory. She could have told herself that if it was really dangerous, surely someone else would see it. Instead, she grabbed her handheld scanner and ran. Again. She sprinted down the hallway, out the emergency exit, and across the side tarmac. Rain from earlier left the ground slick, but she didn't stop. Her lungs burned, her boots slipped, her badge flung back against her vest. The jet touched down, wobbling. Engineering trucks raced toward it. Amahle waved frantically, arms slicing the air. Stop refueling. Don't connect the hose. The engine isn't stable. A mechanic turned toward her, annoyed at first, then froze when he saw the thermal reading on her handheld scanner. Back off, he shouted to the others. Don't hook anything up. Seconds later, a small puff of smoke burst from the engine. Not an explosion, but a warning of what could have happened. The mechanic stared at the jet, then at her. You just saved us a major incident, he muttered, shaken. Who told you to check it? No one, she said, still panting. I just saw it. He gave her a look that hovered between respect and worry, like he wasn't sure whether to thank her or tell her to watch her back. When she returned to the terminal, soaked and shivering, a shadow waited for her at the entrance. Lorenzo. He wasn't surrounded by his usual entourage. It was just him, leaning against the frame, sleeves rolled up, tie gone, hair slightly out of place like he'd been dragging his hands through it. His expression was unreadable. Follow me. There was something in his voice, not just authority, but something quieter, like he was dragging his temper back by the collar. Inside his office, she sat across from him, her wet gloves clutched in her hands. Her heartbeat still hadn't fully calmed. You risked your life running toward a landing jet, he said quietly. I wasn't thinking, she whispered. Clearly. He exhaled, pacing. You shouldn't have had to. Someone should have caught that anomaly earlier. Someone didn't. The head engineer stood in the doorway, arms folded. She's being targeted, he muttered. This isn't random. Amahle's heart tightened. Why would anyone target me? I'm nobody. Lorenzo stopped pacing. He looked at her like he wanted to disagree with every part of that sentence. No, he said. You're someone who sees what others miss. His eyes held hers for a moment that felt too long. Too intense. There was gratitude there, and worry, and something else she wasn't brave enough to name. She looked away first. He softened his tone. Go home. Rest. Stay off the logs for a few days. She nodded. The practical part of her brain knew he was right. The stubborn part of her hated that stepping back felt like letting them win. As she left the office, her phone buzzed. Another message. You should have let it burn. Her breath froze. This wasn't just about engine logs. This was a warning. And she was now officially in danger. The next morning, Amahle pretended everything was normal. She walked through the staff entrance with her head down, scanning her badge, greeting no one. The sliding doors hissed open, letting in the steady hum of airport life, rolling suitcases, boarding calls, tired children, impatient businessmen. To everyone else, it was just another day. To her, it felt like walking into a trap she couldn't see. She sat at her workstation and tried to focus on routine tasks, baggage weight reports, minor delay logs, gate rotation schedules. Nothing dangerous. Nothing that could trigger another anonymous message. Nothing that would make the wrong people say her name. But the unease wouldn't leave. Every time someone laughed behind her, she flinched. Every time a supervisor walked past, her shoulders tensed. Around mid-morning, her screen flickered. For a second, she thought it was a glitch. Then a new window appeared on the monitor, in plain text. We told you to stop. Her hands went cold. She looked around. No one seemed to notice. Her coworkers were chatting, sipping coffee, scrolling their phones. No one was looking at her screen. No one looked guilty. No one looked scared. The message vanished as quickly as it came. She could hear her pulse in her ears. They had access to her terminal. To her login. To her space. Whoever they weren't just watching her. They owned the system. She logged out in a rush, fingers fumbling on the keys. She didn't even make it 10 steps from her desk before security appeared. Ms. Dubé. The guard's tone was formal. Too formal. You're requested at the VIP tower again. Her throat tightened. By who? By the CEO. This time when she entered Lorenzo's office, he wasn't standing. He was seated at the edge of his desk, jacket off, sleeves rolled up. Stress clung to him like another layer of clothing. The head of IT, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, stood beside him with a tablet in hand. Sit, Lorenzo said. She sat, palms pressed against her knees so he wouldn't see how they shook. Your account has been compromised, the IT director said. Someone is mirroring your activity, piggybacking on your access. Meaning? She asked, voice thin. Meaning, Lorenzo cut in. They're using your login to get into files they shouldn't touch. Restricted maintenance reports. Jet acquisition documents. Board-level clearance reports. She blinked. But, why use my account? I'm low-level. Because if anything goes wrong, Lorenzo said quietly, they blame you. Her stomach twisted. We traced the injection route. The IT director turned the tablet so she could see. Strings of code, timestamps, access logs, an entire language of violation. Someone at executive level authorized a shadow permission layer on your profile. I don't. That's enough for now, Lorenzo said sharply, stopping the IT man from drowning her in jargon. His gaze stayed on her, steady, focused. It wasn't just the gaze of a CEO evaluating risk, it was a man looking at someone he refused to let be collateral. You said your father worked around planes, he continued. She nodded. Then you know something other people don't understand, he said. Things don't fail on their own. People fail them. Or break them. She stared at her hands. What do you want me to do? Officially? His mouth curved without humor. Stay away from anything sensitive. And unofficially? He hesitated for a beat too long. Unofficially, he said slowly, you keep paying attention. But you don't move unless I tell you. She looked up, meeting his eyes. Up close, she could see faint stubble on his jaw, the crease at the corner of his mouth, the tiredness he never showed on magazine covers. So I'm bait now, she said. Lorenzo didn't deny it. Protected bait, he said instead. I have people watching your terminals. Your badge. Your movements. Anyone who touches your account, I'll know. Her chest tightened. Why me? It came out quieter than she intended, carrying more than just fear. Why her life, her job, her peace? He exhaled. For the first time, his voice sounded less like a CEO and more like a man who'd been holding everything together with bare hands. Because you saw something you shouldn't have seen, he said. And instead of looking away, you ran toward it. You mean the jet, she murmured. I mean everything. Something in his tone warmed the cold in her spine for just a moment. Not enough to make her feel safe. Just enough to make her feel less alone. The days that followed blurred into a strange mix of normal and not normal. Normal, she still reported for shifts. She still ate lunch in the staff cafeteria. She still wore her reflective vest and carried her scanner. She still laughed when one of the baggage handlers made a joke too loud. Not normal, she felt eyes on her constantly. Security cameras tracked her movements with unusual precision. Sometimes she'd turn around and find a guard standing just a little too close to be coincidence. And every so often, she'd glance up at the mezzanine and catch a glimpse of Lorenzo above the terminal floor, watching her with that unreadable expression. He wasn't pretending she didn't exist. And neither were the people trying to silence her. The next escalation came 3 nights later. She was assigned to late-night monitoring again. The airport was quieter at that hour, but never truly asleep. Lights glowed along the runways, the intercom voice sounded tired, cleaners moved like ghosts between empty chairs. She checked incoming flight manifests, scanning absolutely routine details, letting the monotony calm her. She told herself tonight would be boring. Boring was safe. Then an unscheduled arrival appeared on her screen. Private jet. No airline logo. High-profile security tag. She frowned. That's not on the slot list, she muttered. The ground control chat lit up. Engineering, we're not briefed on this bird. Security, VIP arrival. Clear hangar C, need minimal staff present. She didn't like that. Minimal staff meant minimal witnesses. Her scanner pinged. Preliminary engine diagnostics streamed in from the approaching plane. Her eyes narrowed. Heat distribution, uneven. Vibration, elevated. Pressure, bordering red. It was wrong. She reached for her radio again. This is analyst Dubé at Ops. I'm reading unstable values on the inbound private. The channel crackled, then died completely. A system alert flashed, communications error. Channel unavailable. Her heartbeat stuttered. Someone had killed the line. Again. She stared at the screen, at the jet icon approaching, at the numbers screaming quietly that something was off. She could have sat there. She could have obeyed Lorenzo and stayed out of sensitive territory. She could have decided that whatever power games were being played above her pay grade were not her business. Instead, she grabbed her handheld and ran. Again. By the time she reached the edge of Hangar C, the jet had already rolled into position. Its engine spooled down, but the residual heat glowed on her scanner like a warning. Security men in dark suits formed a wall around the boarding stairs. She shouldn't be here, she knew that. She went anyway. Excuse me, she called, trying to sound official, not breathless. Ground operations. I need to double-check engine readings before any refueling or transfers. One of the men turned. He didn't look like regular airport security. His gaze was sharp, his movements clean, like someone used to much bigger guns than whatever the airport allowed. He walked toward her. Your presence is not required, he said, accent clipped. She held up her scanner. My readings say otherwise. He looked at the number on her badge, then at her face. Something like recognition flickered in his eyes. You're Dubé, he said. Her mouth went dry. How do you know my name? He smiled without warmth. You're more famous than you think. She swallowed. Famous was not what she wanted to be. Before she could respond, a voice drifted from the open jet door. Is there a problem? A man in a tailored coat stepped into view, followed by another security agent. He wore the kind of casual confidence that came from power and protection, the kind that assumed the world would move around him. The first man turned slightly. Just a ground analyst, sir. Amahle straightened. Your jet is showing signs of thermal imbalance. I'm requesting temporary hold until... The man in the coat studied her as if she were a curious insect that had wandered onto the wrong surface. What's your name? He asked. She hesitated. Amahle. Ah, he said smoothly. The girl who kept a minor incident from becoming a scandal. I've heard of you. The way he said it, minor incident, made her skin crawl. Like lives were just numbers on a page. I'm just doing my job, she replied. And I'm just doing mine, he said. Which also involves keeping this airport on schedule. We don't need delays over theoretical issues. Her grip tightened on the scanner. They're not theoretical. He stepped down one more stair, coming closer. Up close, his smile didn't reach his eyes. Then log your concerns, he said. Through proper channels. Through your supervisor. Through the people whose job it is to decide what's serious and what isn't. Her throat closed. They're the ones ignoring it. He smiled again, like they were sharing a private joke. Then perhaps you're looking in the wrong direction. Something about his tone made her instinct scream. She took a deliberate step back. Fine. I've done my part. It's recorded. Good girl, he said softly. She hated the way it made her feel, small and cornered and furious all at once. Her father used to call her engine whisperer when she got things right. Hearing, good girl, from this stranger made her want to scrub her skin. As she turned to leave, one of the security men brushed past her, whispering just loud enough for her to hear. Careful where you run, analyst. One day there won't be a runway under your feet. Her hand shook on the scanner. They didn't just want her silent. They wanted her scared. She barely slept when her shift ended. She lay in her small airport dormitory, eyes on the ceiling, replaying every word. The unscheduled arrival. The cut communication. The man in the coat who seemed to know too much. The threat disguised as a joke. She thought, briefly, of Lorenzo's face when he told her she was being targeted. The anger he tried to hide. The fraction of a moment when it had looked personal, not just professional. She couldn't let it go. Not anymore. So when the sun came up, she made the most dangerous decision of her life. She sent everything she had straight to Lorenzo. Not to an intermediary. Not to a liaison. Directly to him. She attached engine data, timestamps, screenshots of system messages and communication failures. She told him about Hangar C, about the man in the coat, about the threat. Every detail. Every number. Every line. She hesitated only once, thumb hovering over the send button. Then she whispered, forget being invisible, and tapped send. It didn't take long. Less than an hour later, her door buzzed. She opened it expecting security, or maybe her supervisor. Instead, Lorenzo stood there. Up close, in the harsh dormitory hallway light, he looked less polished. There were circles under his eyes. Anger simmered beneath the surface, tightly controlled, like a storm forced into a glass. For a second, neither of them spoke. He took in the cramped room behind her, the narrow bed, the tiny wardrobe, the stack of manuals on the floor. It was the first time he'd seen the world she went back to after saving his jets. Pack a bag, he said. Her heart jumped. Excuse me. You're not staying here. His gaze flicked past her shoulder, into the tiny room. Your system was compromised. Your dorm is probably monitored, if not already searched. She swallowed. Searched? Not yet, he said. But it will be. I want you somewhere they can't touch you. I can't just leave my assigned quarters. You can, he interrupted. Because I'm ordering you to. Pack a bag, Ms. Dubé. I'm not asking. His tone left no room for argument, but there was something else underneath it, a note of urgency that didn't feel like it was just about liability. It felt like worry. She grabbed her small suitcase and stuffed it with clothes and the only things that mattered, her father's old wrench keychain, her aviation notebook, her worn copy of a maintenance handbook he'd given her before she left Ghana. Lorenzo waited in the hallway, impatient but silent. At one point, she brushed past him, close enough to catch the faint scent of his cologne, and for the briefest moment, the whole surreal danger of the situation tangled with the too human awareness that this powerful man was standing outside her tiny door, dismantling the distance between their worlds. When she stepped out with the bag, he took it from her without comment and led her downstairs. This is excessive, she said as they walked across the service lot toward a black SUV. This is necessary, he replied. Because of data? She pressed. Or because of whoever was in that jet? He opened the passenger door for her. Because of both. She slid inside. You're being vague. I'm being careful. He shut the door and moved around to the driver's side. When he climbed in, he finally added, the man in the coat is tied to a group that's been circling Marquette Air for months. They've made offers, pushed deals, dug for weaknesses. We don't know who all they've bought, but we know they have people inside. Inside the board, she asked softly. He didn't answer. Which was answer enough. The VIP tower felt like another world. From the outside, it was just part of the airport's architecture, a sleek glass column overlooking the runways. Inside, it was a fortress disguised as luxury, secure elevators, controlled access, floors only a handful of people could reach. Lorenzo led her to a suite near the top. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the space, offering a full view of the tarmac and the city beyond. A desk sat near the glass, its monitors already displaying live engine feeds. This will be your temporary workspace, he said. And your accommodation until it's safe for you to leave. She stared at him. I can't stay here. You can and you will. I'm not, she swallowed. I'm not family. I'm not executive staff. I'm just. Stop saying, just, he snapped, sharper than he meant to. The word hung between them. He exhaled, forcing his voice lower. You're the only person who's flagged 3 critical anomalies in 2 weeks. That makes you either incredibly lucky or incredibly competent. I don't believe in luck. She looked at the screens instead of his face, afraid that if she held his gaze too long, she'd forget how big the gap was between their worlds. You really think they'll come after me? They already have, he said. They tried to use your access. They tried to scare you. Next step is to remove you. Her skin prickled. Why? She whispered. It's not like I'm on the board. I don't approve anything. You see things, he said. And people who see things are dangerous. To them, he didn't add. But she heard it anyway. She took a slow breath. What do you need from me? He stepped closer to the desk, pulling up a new set of files. Their shoulders almost brushed, and she could see his reflection in the glass, jaw tight, eyes focused, carrying the kind of weight she was only beginning to understand. You have a talent for pattern recognition, he said. I need you to comb through the last 6 weeks of maintenance approvals, focusing on private jets and VIP charters. Look for anything that doesn't match, signatures that don't belong, irregular timing, repeats in the same hangars. You think the tampering goes back weeks? I think it goes back months, he said. But we start with what we can catch quickly. He turned to her fully. You asked earlier why you. Here's your answer. Because this isn't just about marketeer avoiding bad press. It's about stopping planes from falling out of the sky just so someone can profit. Her throat tightened. That's what they're gambling with. Lives, he said simply. Strapped into seats, trusting us. For the first time since this started, she heard something crack in his voice. Not fear. Anger. A protective kind of fury, as if each passenger was a promise he refused to break. She nodded once. Then let's find them. For a moment, the CEO and the ground analyst stood side by side, staring at the same screens, breathing the same charged air, united by something that had nothing to do with money or titles. Then they started digging. Hours passed. Amahle lost track of time as she scrolled through logs and signatures, cross-checking tail numbers and hangar schedules. Lorenzo worked on the other side of the desk, sending encrypted messages, locking down access, calling in only the people he trusted, which, she noticed, wasn't many. At one point, she looked up and caught him quietly studying her over the top of his monitor. Not evaluating. Not calculating. Just, watching. As if trying to understand how someone like her had walked straight into a world full of traps and hadn't turned back. He looked away the moment their eyes met. She did too. But something had shifted. Here, she said eventually, pointing to her screen. These 3 jets. Different companies, different owners, but every one of them was cleared through the same maintenance supervisor. Lorenzo leaned in. His shoulder brushed hers for half a second, sending a spark of awareness through her that she immediately fought to ignore. Let me guess. Bellini. She shook her head. Worse. He's listed as secondary sign-off. The primary sign-off is someone with board-level clearance. His jaw tightened. Which one? She enlarged the signature field. The name appeared in clean, confident letters. Senator Falco. A chill ran through her. That's impossible, she whispered. Why would a board member be directly approving engine maintenance? He wouldn't, Lorenzo said. Not legitimately. He met her eyes. And that second of connection told her he already knew the answer, and it wasn't good. Now, he murmured, we have a problem big enough to shake more than engines. Senator Falco's name on the screen didn't make sense at first. He's a politician, Amahle said quietly. What is he doing signing off on maintenance? Overreaching, Lorenzo muttered. Or covering tracks. He pulled up additional files, fingers moving with controlled urgency. Falco chairs the Safety Oversight Committee on the board. That's supposed to be a ceremonial position. He's turned it into something else. Amahle clicked on each jet linked to his name. These 3 all had anomalies within 48 hours of departure. Heat spikes. Pressure instability. All signed off as acceptable operational tolerance. Who wrote that phrase? Lorenzo asked. Same person every time, she said. One of the senior engineers, but the final approval is Falco's. So the engineer takes the fall on paper, Lorenzo said, while the real authority stays above blame. A silence stretched between them, heavy and electric. She stared at the data until the numbers blurred. This isn't just bad protocol. This is intentional. He leaned on the edge of the desk, hands braced. They're pushing unsafe jets into the air. If one goes down, we're finished. Stock crash. Legal ruin. Perfect opportunity for a buyout. A competitor, she asked. Or a group that doesn't like how much of the sky we own. His jaw clenched. And Falco has been trying to convince the board to consider strategic partnerships for months. By sabotaging your own planes, she said, horrified. It wouldn't look like sabotage, he replied. It would look like a tragedy. And tragedies make people desperate. She swallowed. You think he's planning an actual crash? I think he's playing with odds he doesn't care about, Lorenzo said. And people like that don't mind if lives are collateral. Her stomach twisted. She'd suspected danger. She hadn't realized they were standing on the edge of a disaster someone wanted. What do we do? She asked softly. He straightened, his voice steady. We build a case he can't talk his way out of. For the next 2 days, their world shrank to the VIP tower. Amahle barely left the room except to grab coffee or change shirts. She and Lorenzo pored over logs, cross-checking Falco's approvals against weather anomalies, crew rosters, and flight paths. Patterns emerged. Certain jets always went through the same hangars. Certain supervisors were always on duty when questionable approvals were made. Certain flights had insurance coverage raised days before minor incidents that never made it to the news. It's like they're testing how far they can push without killing anyone, Amahle muttered. Yet, Lorenzo said quietly. She glanced at him. You sound too calm about this. He shook his head. I'm not calm. I'm furious. Calm is the only way to think clearly while I'm furious. Her lips twitched despite the gravity. Impressive self-control. Occupational requirement. His eyes softened for a second. Are you holding up? She wanted to lie. Yes. He tilted his head. Try again. Her shoulders dropped. I'm scared half the time. Angry the other half. And every time I see Falco's name I want to throw something at the screen. That, he said, is the most honest answer I've heard in months. Something warm flickered between them. Not romantic in the traditional sense, just a deepening of trust. A tether strengthening quietly. He turned back to the monitors before she could overthink it. The first real crack in their progress appeared on the third night. They were mid-session, tracing a cluster of suspicious approvals, when a flashing alert popped. Unauthorized access attempt, internal. He tapped it open. What is it? She asked. The board system is trying to yank server logs from this tower, he said. Someone's requesting copies of everything we're touching. Can they see what we see? She whispered. Not if I lock it down fast enough. His fingers flew across the keyboard. Amahle watched the command lines scroll like rapid-fire arguments. Another alert. Access denied, override requested. Falco, Lorenzo muttered. He's trying to force an audit. Of us? She asked. Of this room, this network, this investigation. He glanced at her. This means he knows someone's looking at his approvals. A strange mix of fear and adrenaline rippled through her. Being right didn't feel like victory. It felt like falling through a thin sheet of ice. Because of the last jet? She asked. The one in Hangar C? Because someone in his circle saw you there, Lorenzo said. You were right. You've become visible. Visible. A target. So what now? She asked, voice tight. Now, he said, we get off the network. He moved with sudden efficiency, pulling out a slim black drive and connecting it to the system. We're copying everything locally, he said. If they purge logs from the servers, we keep a copy. They can do that? She whispered. Just erase what we've seen. Not without leaving fingerprints, he said. But fingerprints don't matter if the plane is already in the ocean. His bluntness made her stomach twist. She nodded. Tell me what to do. He pointed to a separate terminal. Back up anything tied to Falco, private jets, or high-risk anomalies. Don't rely on the cloud. Think like they think. If you wanted all this to disappear, what would you attack first? She exhaled slowly, forcing her fingers to steady. Servers, she said. Then physical copies. Good. So we make physical copies they don't know about. They printed stacks of logs, signatures, and thermal charts, compiling a thick black folder. The same folder that would one day be in her hands when she walked into the boardroom. But they weren't there yet. They were still in the middle of the storm. The betrayal arrived as a polite knock. It was late. The airport outside was calm, but the VIP tower hummed with tension. Amahle sat cross-legged on the couch, highlighting suspicious signatures. Lorenzo was on a call with legal counsel. A soft rap sounded on the door. She looked up. Expecting someone? He frowned, shook his head, and muted the call. "Who is it?" he called out. "It's Marco," a voice answered. "From security." Lorenzo relaxed slightly and opened the door. Marco was one of the few people Lorenzo trusted, a man with quiet eyes, steady posture, and a history of pulling executives out of messy situations. Amahle had seen him hovering near the VIP checkpoint more than once, watching everything. He stepped inside, nodding at her politely before turning serious. "Sorry to interrupt," Marco said. "We've got a situation." Lorenzo stepped aside. "Come in." Marco glanced at Amahle, then at the folder on the table. "This about Falco?" he asked. Her heart stuttered. "How do you know about?" "Word gets around," he said. "Especially when the senator starts asking why a ground analyst has suddenly gone missing from her regular station and why she's been seen entering restricted floors." Amahle stiffened. "He's asking about me?" "Too many questions for someone who supposedly doesn't know your name," Marco said. "And he's requested an emergency board session for tomorrow morning." "Why?" Lorenzo asked, already knowing. "Officially, to address the integrity of leadership and safety practices." Marco's voice dropped. "Unofficially, to strip you of your position before you can accuse him of anything." Amahle's throat closed. "Can they do that?" "If he convinces enough of the board that Lorenzo is a liability," Marco said, "yes. They'll use your own investigation against you," Amahle whispered. "They'll try," Lorenzo said. "But they don't know how much we have." Marco shifted his weight. "You walk in there alone, they'll pin you to the wall. You walk in with her," he nodded toward Amahle. "They'll panic." Amahle swallowed. She wasn't sure if that was supposed to be comforting. But one thing was clear. Tomorrow wasn't just a meeting. It was a battlefield. Amahle could barely sleep. Even in the luxury of the VIP tower suite, with its soundproof walls and soft lights, her mind wouldn't slow down. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment: Hangar C, the man in the coat, the threats, the engine smoke, the stolen access, Falco's name stamped on signatures like a silent brand. Most of all, she replayed tomorrow. A boardroom full of powerful people. A senator who wanted her silenced. A CEO willing to drag himself into a storm for the sake of truth. When morning came, her stomach twisted into a knot so tight she thought she'd be sick. She splashed cold water on her face and braided her hair back with trembling fingers. A soft knock sounded on the door. She opened it to find Lorenzo leaning on the frame, already in a charcoal suit, tie perfectly knotted. But his eyes gave him away, they weren't calm. They were alert, bright, dangerous. He looked like a man who planned to walk into war and refused to lose. "You ready?" he asked quietly. "I don't know," she whispered. "Good," he said. "Only fools feel ready before a fight." There was something reassuring in the way he said it, not dismissive, not patronizing. He wasn't expecting her to be fearless, just present. They rode the secure elevator down. Halfway through the descent, she asked the question that had been burning in her throat all night. "What if they don't believe us?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he shifted slightly closer to her, not touching her, but close enough that she felt the warmth of him, steadying her like a hand that wasn't allowed to reach. "They will," he said softly. Because when the truth walks into a room, everything else rearranges itself. She didn't know if that was a reassurance or a prophecy. The elevator stopped with a soft chime. 2 security guards waited to escort them into the executive wing. Not the usual guards. These were Marco's men, trusted, silent, unsmiling. The hallway was long, carpeted, lined with aviation art and framed photos of historic Marchetti Air landmarks. Today, it felt like a corridor leading to judgment. When they reached the doors of the boardroom, Lorenzo paused and looked at her. "This room was built to intimidate," he said. "Don't let it." She exhaled. "I'll try. If at any point you feel unsafe," he added, voice lower, "you walk out. I don't care if Falco explodes. You get up and leave. Understood?" She nodded. Then he pushed the doors open. The room fell silent. Every board member turned to look at them, some curious, some annoyed, a few openly hostile. Falco sat near the head of the table, dressed in a navy suit, shoulders relaxed, hands folded with the confidence of a man who believed he still controlled the temperature in the room. Until his gaze moved past Lorenzo and landed on her. His jaw twitched. Well, she thought, that answered the question of whether he expected her. Lorenzo led her to the opposite end of the table, not beside the door, not in some back corner. He positioned her where everyone could see her. A statement before a single word was spoken. Falco leaned back in his chair. "Marchetti," he said with a smile that wasn't a smile. "I must say, bringing staff into a confidential session is certainly one way to start your defense." A murmur rippled through the room. Lorenzo didn't blink. "We're not here to defend anything." "Oh." Falco's eyes glittered. "Then by all means, begin whatever performance you've prepared." Lorenzo didn't sit. He placed a black folder, the same folder he and Amahle had filled over sleepless nights, directly onto the polished table. The sound echoed in the silent room. "This," he said, "is documentation of 6 weeks' worth of questionable maintenance approvals tied to this board's safety oversight chair." Falco laughed. "Documentation compiled by a ground analyst with no engineering authority?" Lorenzo's voice stayed calm. "Documentation backed by thermal scans, engine readings, time-stamped signatures, and the admissions of several staff." "The accusations of frightened employees," Falco corrected. "Or the evidence of criminal negligence," Lorenzo replied. A hush fell. Falco's expression shifted, only slightly, but enough for Amahle to notice. A flash of irritation. A tightening around the eyes. A calculation interrupted. "And what," Falco said slowly, "does the analyst have to do with this fantasy you've created?" "That analyst," Lorenzo replied, "prevented 2 separate engine incidents and risked her life running onto a live tarmac when your approvals would have sent unstable jets into the sky." Falco's composure slipped. "So that's why she's here," he said. "Your risky little heroine." Amahle's heart hammered. But Lorenzo didn't even glance at her. "She's here," he said sharply, "because she saw what the rest of you refused to see." That made several board members lean forward. The room had shifted, subtly, but decisively. Falco adjusted his cuffs. "We cannot base corporate decisions on the paranoia of a junior staff member." "She's not paranoid." Lorenzo took a slow breath. "And she's not wrong." He clicked a remote. The screen behind them lit up with thermal charts, engine readings, cycle logs, heat signatures. Amahle recognized every color, every anomaly. Her heart beat faster. This was her world, exposed on a screen in a room full of people who never touched the tarmac. "These readings," Lorenzo said, "are from jets signed off under Senator Falco's oversight. Jets that experienced significantly elevated thermal levels within hours or days of departure." A director frowned. Why would Falco be signing technical documents? "Excellent question," Lorenzo said. He tapped the remote again. Audio filled the room. Falco's voice. Clear as day. Move the refit to next week. No, don't ground the jet yet. We need it in the air for that charter. If it holds, we sign the deal. If it doesn't, well. Insurance will ease the blow. One board member gasped. Another whispered, Dear God. Falco surged forward. This is fabricated. I had it verified by 2 independent forensic audio experts, Lorenzo replied. Falco's face flushed an angry shade of red. You're framing me. You framed yourself, Lorenzo countered. We're just playing the tape. The room felt electrified, like the air before a storm. Falco pointed at Amahle. You did this. You've been snooping where you don't belong. Feeding him false data. Setting me up. She felt her pulse in her ears, but she forced herself to sit straighter. No, she said quietly. I saw danger. And I refused to look away. Several board members exchanged looks. Falco sneered. You're out of your depth, girl. You think you understand aviation because you grew up in a hangar. You don't know the first thing about how the world actually works. Lorenzo stepped forward so fast the boardroom seemed to gasp. Don't speak to her like that. Falco blinked. Lorenzo hadn't raised his voice. He didn't need to. She's the reason passengers are alive, he said. The reason 3 jets didn't become burning headlines. The reason this company still stands. Falco scoffed. She's a nobody. Lorenzo's eyes hardened. She's the only person in this room who isn't. The silence that followed was the kind that changed stories. The gray-haired woman who chaired the board lifted her hand. I move to suspend Senator Falco pending a full independent investigation. Another director raised his hand. Seconded. Falco stood abruptly, chair scraping the floor. You can't be serious. You're going to believe them over me? No, the chairwoman said calmly. We're going to investigate. And we're going to protect this airline from whoever endangered it. Security moved toward Falco. He glared at Amahle one last time, eyes full of threats he didn't dare say aloud. Be careful, he murmured. You've made enemies you can't see. But Amahle didn't look away. I'm done being afraid, she said. Falco was escorted out. The doors closed behind him. And just like that, the danger didn't vanish, but the room felt breathable again. Lorenzo exhaled slowly and sat down for the first time since they arrived. The tension left his shoulders in a wave he didn't try to hide. Amahle felt her chest loosen too. When the meeting finally ended and the board members dispersed to handle statements, regulators, and legal preparations, Lorenzo walked with her to the balcony overlooking the runway. You did well, he said softly. She laughed weakly. I thought I was going to faint. You didn't. His voice softened. You stood your ground. Because you believed me, she whispered. He turned toward her. No, he said. I believed the truth. You just happened to be the one brave enough to bring it into the room. Her eyes stung. He glanced at her suitcase in the corner. You're not returning to the dorms. That stays off the table. She nodded. I know. We'll talk about next steps, he added. Your role. Your protection. Your future here. My future, she echoed. Yes. He looked at her in a way that made her breath catch, not romantic, not yet, but honest. Present. Human. You're not a temporary problem to be handled. You're someone this company needs. For the first time, she believed that. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown message. You saved one airline. Now save yourself. The sky has enemies you haven't met. Her fingers trembled as she showed Lorenzo. He read it. His jaw tightened. This isn't over. She swallowed. So what do we do now? He looked back at the runway, engines roaring in the distance like a heartbeat. Now, he said, we prepare for whoever sent that message. She nodded. And until then, she asked. He finally turned to her again. Until then, he said softly, you stay where I can see you. Something in his voice made her chest warm. He stepped back, letting the moment settle. And if you're listening to this story, his future self would say in the narration, and you want more stories about courage in places no one expects it, don't forget to subscribe. Like this video so more people hear it, and tell us in the comments what you would have done in her place. Because sometimes the smallest voice in the hangar is the one that changes the sky. And Amahle Dubé had only just begun.